On Friday, 12th of January 2023, welcome to another Gttv News, and I am your presenter, Habsatuba. Let's begin with the headlines. A fire outbreak in Serekunda caused by gas malfunction has burned down shops. The ruling National People's Party has inaugurated the defected United Democratic Party campaign manager, Mamadou Sabali, in a grand style welcoming ceremony. To local sports. The Gambia senior team players have recounted the near-fatal accident after their chartered flight to Ivory Coast made an emergency landing after loss of cabin pressure and oxygen. Still on the Scorpions, who have finally arrived in Ivory Coast after Wednesday's flight debacle. To international news, the World Court has had South Africa's genocide claim against Israel over Gaza invasion. Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema has urged people to move from towns to villages amid outbreak of cholera. Oil prices rise on US and UK strikes over Red Sea attacks. Kenyan lawyers protest against Ruto's threats on judges. Those are the headlines, and now the news in details. Stay tuned. Now the news in details. Serekunda gas fire outbreak has burned down food and clothing shops amounting to thousands of Gambian dollars, which is known to be caused by a spark of cooking gas at around 10 on Thursday morning. Our Jaju reports.
The shops has been submerged despite the local residents' attempt to put out the ravaging fire as fire and rescue officers struggled to arrive at the scene. Due to accessibility linked to poor design of Gambian narrow road, refrigerators, canned drinks, clothing, and other materials were burned into end bonds. Bajallo, where the fire started, expressed dismay and apologized to the people whose shops were burned down, while unveiling that he lost more than $50,000. According to him, the fire was sparked by one of his gas he was filling. Ajara to Madam Job, whose shop was also burned down, described the fire outbreak as the disheartening but returned thanks to God for saving the lives in the incident. Madam Job said she lost a huge amount of materials worth into dollars, which she cannot even estimate, adding that she was informed by one of her son, Lamin Sise, who was selling at the shop. Meanwhile, the Kanifi Municipal Council deployed a team led by the deputy mayor and the council's market managers to assess the situation. Speaking for the council, Modunjai consoled the victims while urging the landlords and the tenants to be careful with materials that can spark a fire outbreak. He said they came to the scene, sympathized with the victims, and consoled them as neighbors. He urged the landlords and the tenants to be cautious of anything that can spark fire, especially gas, which fire incident has been arrested recently. Gttv News.
The National People's Party has inaugurated former campaign manager of the opposition United Democratic Party, Mamadou Sabali, at a grand welcoming ceremony held at the party's headquarters in Town. The ceremony was attended by NPP's top brass. Modou Lamin Job tells us more.
On Wednesday, January 10th, officials and supporters of the ruling National People's Party organized a grand welcoming ceremony for the defected campaign manager of the opposition United Democratic Party, Mamadou Sabali, since the latter's democratic U-turn to a party he once labeled as corrupt and incompetent people. The ceremony also saw NPP officials and supporters bolstering into celebrant mood as some took to their toes to dance. Suleiman Kamara, the cybersecurity advisor to the president and NPP media secretary, thanked Mamadou Sabali for joining NPP and described the party as a progressive people movement and calls on youth to join the National People Party because they have big plans for the youth. He further highlighted the significance Sabali will add to the party.
First of all, we are thanking Honorable Mamadou Sabali for taking this decision to come to the National People's Party. National People's Party is a progressive people's movement. We are telling the youths that, we have a plan for them. Otherwise, people like Sabali will not be attracted. Well, you cannot deny Sabali his experience. He's educated, he's eloquent, he knows what he is doing, and he knows politics. And it's going to be a plus for our party. And he is going to also help us in galvanizing the youth of this country.
Commenting on the economic situation of the country and the skyrocketing of basic commodities in the market, Mr. Kamara asserted that post-COVID-19 has contributed to the global economic crisis. However, he argued that despite all the price challenges in the world, Gambia has the cheapest price in the sub-region.
Because of the prices are also high, this is caused by the low supply of labor into the supply chain during the time of COVID. And that has actually a trickle-down effect on our present circumstances. But I can safely tell you that if you look at other African countries, in terms of price-wise, Gambia is one of the cheapest. You can take it to the bank. Gambia is one of the cheapest countries, in West Africa, in the sub-region at the moment.
Speaking to Gttv, Mr. Kamara prophesied that going into the presidential election in 2026, NPP will win a landslide victory and warns for people not to underestimate their results because they are planning to win by 70% vote margin.
NPP will win hands down. NPP is on the march. Do not underestimate our resolve. Do not underestimate our tenacity to win election hands down. In fact, what we are planning for, we are not planning for the 400,000 votes. We are planning to have 75% of vote cast in this country. That's what we are planning.
Reported for Gttv News, I am Mudlamin Job.
To local sports, the Gambia senior team players and their head coach have recounted the near fatal accident after their chartered flight to Ivory Coast made an emergency landing after loss of cabin pressure and oxygen. The chartered Air Cote d'Ivoire left Banjul this afternoon with players and officials bound for Abidjan, but 10 minutes into the flight, the players complained of severe heat, dizziness, and lack of oxygen. Gambia Talents team of reporters caught up with the team shortly after landing at the airport. The Gambia national football team has arrived safely in Ivory Coast ahead of their AFCON opener against Senegal on Monday. The team's journey to AFCON has been marked by many abnormalities as the team play all its qualifiers away after CAF suspend the country's only independent stadium due to being unfit to host international matches. Well, that story from Aissatou Koli will now lead us to our first commercial break. When we come back, we shift our attention to international news. On the international scene, Israel's plan to destroy Gaza comes from the highest level of state. The UN's top court has had the claims were made by South African lawyers as it presented its case accusing Israel of genocide at the International Court of Justice. South Africa also called on the court to order Israel to cease military operation in Gaza, but Israel, which will present its defense on Friday, has vehemently rejected the accusation of baseless. The court will deliver only an opinion on the genocide allegation, although it is being closely watched. Modulamin Job has more on this report.
Tembeka Kukaitobe, a lawyer for the High Court of South Africa, told the ICJ Israel's genocidal intent was evident from the way in which this military attack is being conducted, adding that the intent to destroy Gaza has been nurtured at the highest level of state. Adila Hazim, also representing South Africa, told the court that every day there is mounting irreparable loss of life, property, dignity, and humanity for the Palestinian people, saying nothing will stop the suffering except an order from this court. In its evidence submitted before the hearing, South Africa said Israel's actions were intended to bring about the destruction of a substantial part of the Palestinian national, racial, and ethnical group. Israel will offer its defense on Friday, but as previously said, its actions in the Gaza Strip are justified because it is responding to Hamas' deadly attacks on 7th October. But speaking in court on Thursday, South Africa's Justice Minister Ronald Lamola said that no attack can provide justification for or defend breaches of the Genocide Convention. Israel is a signatory to the Genocide Convention of 1948, which defines genocide and commits states to prevent it. The ICJ is the United Nations highest court based in The Hague in the Netherlands. Its rulings are theoretically legally binding on parties to the ICJ, which include Israel and South Africa, but are not enforceable. In 2022, the court ordered Russia to immediately suspend military operations in Ukraine, an order that was ignored. South Africa presented its case accusing Israel of genocide in Gaza at the ICJ. Under international law, genocide is defined as committing one or more acts with the intention to destroy, in a whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. There were angry scenes outside the ICJ's building, known as the Peace Palace, as Dutch police struggled to keep groups of Palestinians and Israeli supporters apart. Hundreds of people waving Palestinian flags gathered outside the ICJ, calling for a ceasefire. Israeli supporters set up a screen showing images of some of the hostages still being held in Gaza. Red and white police tape has been placed outside the ICJ in an attempt to bring some semblance of order to the chaotic scenes outside. It was in contrast to the formality inside the court, where the Israeli delegation is listening to South Africa's lawyers accuse the country's forces of committing genocide in Gaza. Israel's delegation is expected to highlight its right to self-defense under international law this week. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel has no intention of permanently displacing the people of Gaza or occupying the territory. Unlike the International Criminal Court (ICC), the ICJ cannot prosecute individuals for crimes such as genocide, but its opinions carry weight with the UN and other international institutions. Both pro-Palestinians and pro-Israeli groups protested outside the court on Thursday. On Wednesday, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said, "Our opposition to the ongoing slaughter of the people of Gaza has driven us as a country to approach the ICJ." Israeli President Isaac Herzog called the accusation atrocious and preposterous. "We will be in the International Court of Justice and will present proudly our case of using self-defense under humanitarian law," he said. He added that the Israeli army was doing its utmost under extremely complicated circumstances on the ground to make sure that there will be no unintended consequences and no civilian casualties. Caroline Glick, a former advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, said the case was an affront to the basic concept of morality and reasonableness. Zendango, Director General of South Africa's Department of International Relations and Corporations, told BBC's Africa Daily program that the allegation of genocide against Israel is a strong allegation, but that it is not one that is unfounded. He described South Africa's case as very meticulous while condemning the Hamas attacks of 7 October. He said nothing could justify the level of killings that is taking place in Gaza. The ICJ could rule quickly on South Africa's request for Israel to suspend its military campaign, but a final ruling on whether Israel is committing genocide could take years. South Africa has been highly critical of Israel's military operation in Gaza, and its governing African National Congress has a long history of solidarity with the Palestinian cause. It sees parallels with its struggle against apartheid, a policy of racial segregation and discrimination enforced by the white minority government in South Africa against the country's black majority until the first democratic elections in 1994. In Gaza, more than 23,350 people, mostly women and children, have been killed, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, since the war began in the aftermath of Hamas' 7th October attacks on. Reporting for Gttv News, I am Mudlamin Juk.
Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema has urged people to relocate from towns to villages following the death of about 300 people in cholera outbreak. Poor sanitation is some densely populated urban areas was good breeding ground for cholera. Fatou Chol reports.
President Hakainde Hichilema has said that in order to decongest major towns, residents should relocate to rural areas where there was enough space and perfect sanitation as cholera outbreak beat in the country. More than 7,500 cholera cases have been reported nationwide since last October. In the last 24 hours, there were more than 500 new cases and 17 deaths, the health ministry said. The reopening of schools have been delayed as part of a series of preventive measures. The disease has so far spread to 8 of Zambia's 10 provinces. The World Health Organization, WHO, is to send about 1 million cholera vaccine doses in the coming days in a bid to contain the outbreak. On Wednesday, Mr. Hichilema visited the Hero Stadium Cholera Treatment Center, where there are more than 1,000 patients in the capital, Lusaka. Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema said water in rural areas is cleaner, adding that the government would take some hard-to-swallow measures in an effort to eradicate the waterborne disease. He appeared to blame Zimbabweans who moved to towns without a clear objective for the mushrooming of poorly planned informal settlements. Some young people were hanging around and doing nothing in towns instead of moving to rural areas to farm, the president said. According to him, there is so much land in the villages. There is clean water. We can build nice homes in the villages, which are not polluted, and that the authorities would upgrade existing slums in towns and prevent the emergency of new ones. Neighboring Mozambique and Zimbabwe have heightened surveillance to prevent cross-border transmission. For months now, Zimbabwe has been battling to stem the spread of cholera because the country lacks clean water. The bacterial disease is spread by contaminated water or food and causes severe dehydration from vomiting and diarrhea. It can kill within hours if left untreated. Reporting for Gttv News.
Oil prices jumped by 4% after the US and UK launched strikes in Yemen over recent attacks by Houthi rebels on ships in the Red Sea. Brent crude hit $80 per barrel for the first time this year as the Iran-backed rebels vow to retaliate against military action by Western powers. While the price rose, it is below high reach when Russia invaded Ukraine. But the UK government fears that if disruption to cargo traffic spreads, another energy shock is possible. Fatou Chol reports.
On Friday, Brent crude, the international benchmark for oil prices for much of the world, hit $80.55 per barrel, while U.S. West Texas crude increased by 2.71% to $74.73. The UK government is concerned that ongoing attacks on shipping in the Red Sea could weigh on the UK economy, where growth remains fragile. Higher energy prices restocking inflation just as it has begun to slow. Meanwhile, the cost of shipping containers on vessels has jumped, meaning that companies could choose to pass on this expense to consumers. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said that the attacks had caused major disruption to a vital trade route and higher commodity prices. But Simon French, chief economist of Panyol Gordon, pointed out that energy prices are still considerably lower than they were 4 months ago. He said that when the Bank of England comes to make its next interest rate decision in February, oil prices are still likely to be some 20% lower than they were in autumn. Houthi rebels in Yemen have stepped up attacks on commercial vessels since the start of Israel-Hamas war in October. The U.S. said there has been 27 attacks in the Red Sea since mid-November. The group has been using drones and rockets against foreign-owned vessels transporting goods through the Strait of Bab al-Mandab, a 20-mile-wide channel that split Eritrea and Djibouti on the African side and Yemen on the Arabian Peninsula. Ships usually take this key trade route from the south to reach Egypt's Suez Canal further north. Many companies are now sending vessels around the Cape of Good Hope instead, a route that adds at least 10 days of travel. On Friday, shipping data shows that at least 4 oil tankers changed course since the overnight strike by the US and the UK. Currently, about a quarter of the world's shipping containers are being diverted. According to the White House, about 15% of global seaborne trade passes through the Red Sea. This includes 8% of global grain, 12% of seaborne oil, and 8% of the world's liquefied natural gas. Vincent Clark, chief executive of Maersk, the shipping giant, told the BBC that significant disruption to global trade was already being felt down to the end consumer. Several companies have said that they have already seen or are expecting a knock-on effect. The Houthi group has declared its support for Hamas and has said it is targeting ships traveling to Israel, although it is not clear if all the ships that have been attacked were actually heading to Israel. As a result of the attacks, Maersk and several of the world's other major shipping lines have been avoiding a key route for global trade as they prioritize the safety of their crews. We have ships that are being shot at. We have colleagues whose lives are at risk when this happens, and we can simply not justify sailing through these danger zones and the way the situation is right now, Mr. Clark said. He said the longer route around Africa was sucking capacity out of the global shipping system in the short term, adding anything from 7 days to 2 weeks to a ship's journey, as well as costing $1 million, estimatedly €783,000 more in fuel alone. Meanwhile, Michelle Weiss-Buckman, an analyst at Leos List Intelligence, which advised the maritime industry, told the BBC that some ship owners are continuing to make the same journeys through the Red Sea simply because their contracts do not allow them to do otherwise. Reporting for Gttv.
The Law Society of Kenya has threatened to initiate an impeachment against the president as dozens of lawyers are protesting in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, in response to the threat to defy court orders by President William Ruto. Hawa S. Jaju reports.
The lawyers are marching from the Supreme Court to the President's office in the protest organized by the Law Society of Kenya, LSK. President Ruto came under a barrage of criticism last week after he threatened to disobey court orders, alleging some of the unnamed judges had teamed up with the opposition politicians and cartel to block his administration's projects. Law Society of Kenya President Eric Teuri said in the media briefing that president of this country is not above the law, adding that they do not expect him to speak as if obeying the court orders is a favor that he is doing to the country. Mr. Teuri added that the Law Society of Kenya will consider initiating Mr. Ruto's impeachment for violation of the constitution if he continues with his attacks against the judiciary. Law Society of Kenya has assembled a legal team to file a High Court petition to declare Mr. Ruto in violation of the Constitution, Mr. Teuri told the privately owned Standard newspaper. Several high-profile Kenyan lawyers have joined the protest, including former Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka and the former Minister Eugene Wamalwa, both currently opposition politicians. Chief Justice Martha Koome and opposition leader Raila Odinga last week warned Mr. Ruto that defying courts will set the stage for anarchy in the country. OS Jaji, Gttv News.
A fire outbreak in Serekunda caused by gas malfunction has burned down shops. The ruling National People's Party has inaugurated the defected United Democratic Party campaign manager, Mamadou Sabali, in a grand style welcoming ceremony. To local sports. The Gambia senior team players have recounted the near-fatal accident after their chartered flight to Ivory Coast made an emergency landing after loss of cabin pressure and oxygen. Still on the Scorpions, who have finally arrived in Ivory Coast after Wednesday's flight debacle. To international news, the World Court has had South Africa's genocide claim against Israel over Gaza invasion. Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema has urged people to move from towns to villages amid outbreak of cholera. Oil prices rise on US and UK strikes over Red Sea attacks. Kenya lawyers protest against Ruto's threats on judges.
Yoddu sa xat te quality jasna ñoo yor seen cumbukaay tur day uyu borom jasna pire soo ko bëggee fii si biir Gambia bi dawal foofu sa quality jasna your number one stop shop. Ana sama jigéen ñi dama bëgg ngeen jox ma seen nopp garme yi ndaxte quality jasna amal nañ leen